It's funny, on the way over here, I got a call while I'm in the Uber from my son Yamin. He's at the hotel, and he called me up with a Kriya question. He said, "Oh, I usually take off my jacket, but I didn't take off my jacket when I saw the dome. I don't know if to do Kriya on my jacket." So I said, "Rabbi Will holds the jacket's like a coat, you know." I gave him, so you don't have to worry about that because people take it off when they go inside. So I gave him that answer. He said, "I a couple of Ribbis questions." I said, "Oh, good. It's fine. About it." He said, I loaned somebody money in Shkolim and they paid me back in dollars. Is that a problem?" I said, "Oh, maybe I'll touch upon that today." I said, "Was it at the rate that when you gave the Shkolim, or was it the rate that they pay you the dollars at the rate at the time the Shkolim were returned?" He said, "At the rate that when it was returned." So I said, "That's okay." I said, "That's all right." I said, "If it was going to be the rate when you actually loaned the Shkolim, then it would depend upon whether the person who is paying back in the dollars, whether they had dollars or not at that point in time." So I said, so that would depend upon that. But I said, okay, we'll talk about that maybe a little bit later in the Chaburah. Then he said somebody loaned me a coffee cup, and I put coffee in it, and now I want to give them back a different cup. Is that a problem? I said, "Ooh." So I said, "Well, if the value of the cup hasn't gone up, when you return a different cup, so that for sure it's not a problem." And I said, between close friends, something like a cup, a sub, people are usually not makbid would make on it. So a lot of Ribbis Shilas mamish left and right all over the place. Somebody said that the other day I was leaving Kahal Hasidim, which is one of the shuls in the Chicago area for Marav, and somebody came over to me and said that I bought an esrog for my father, and he wanted to pay me back, but I gave him because it shouldn't be a shaila as to whether he owned it completely or not. So I gave him I said, "I'm giving it to you as a complete hakna, whether you pay me back or not." And the esrog was $135. Then he gave me $160. So he said it was just a Ribbis problem. He gave back $160. So I said, well, number one, it's a mecher. Because of the fact that it was a mecher, so the Ramah brings down that if somebody's going to give a little extra as a matana, so if it's a halal transaction, it's not okay. But if it's a mecher transaction, it's okay. And the Shach understands it's even if the person pays back in money. So Kiva Ego understands it's only if the person pays back in merchandise. But he said it's given, and in this particular case, you said that it was an absolute hakna, doesn't have to pay you back altogether. I think you could be made. So anyway, all these Ribbis shadows. Okay. Anyway, so I wanted to speak today about Parsha, Huzla, and Psika. What are these three musketeers? Who are these people? So these are basically all of the different issues, or the general category of the issues that come up when you're dealing not with loan transactions, but with purchase and sale transactions, where you have Ribbis issues that are implicated. I saw in Rabbi Reisman's Sefer, he quoted from the Rav Yaakov Melissa, the Baal Nesivos, who in his Tzavah that he issued for his descendants, he said that I want you to just know one thing. If you're going to go into business, I don't know if he was recommending it or not. He says instead of Yeshiva college, you go to Sai Sims. He said, so if you're going to go into business, then I want you to constantly review these particular halachos, namely these halachos of the Tarsha, Psika, Huzla. You have to constantly go over them because they come up mamish all the time. They come up mamish all the time. So what are the questions? What are the different issues over here? Usually, we're only dealing with Ribbis D'Rabbanan because we're dealing with mecher transactions. There are certain leniencies, as we know, when you're dealing with Ribbis D'Rabbanan. Like, for example, when it comes to stock organizations, if they're the ones making the extra money, so then, as opposed to the ones who are giving the extra money, then they can rely upon the heterim of Moshe Yisomim, the heterim of stock funds when it comes to Ribbis D'Rabbanan. So there's certain heterim. It's good to know. Also, a question of when there's a suffix. Sometimes you could be obviously more maker where you're dealing with Ribbis D'Rabbanan. So most of the time, we're going to be dealing with Ribbis D'Rabbanan, and that's a very important starting point. But it's also important to know that even purchase transactions in a number of different scenarios, they can be turned into Ribbis Deraisa. They can turn into Ribbis Deraisa potentially if you have a situation of Zakvan Alav B'Milveh. Zakvan Alav B'Milveh, where let's say that I owe money to a storekeeper because I purchased a lot of items and I owe the money on credit to the storekeeper. And at some point in time, the storekeeper tabulates all the amounts that I owe and sums them all up into one giant sum and says, okay, this is the full amount that you owe me. At that point in time, the Ramah in Hilchos Pruzbul writes that, for example, that would turn what would otherwise a purchase obligation into a hava obligation, so that it would be subject to Shemitas Ksafim, and the poskim say, same thing is true over here. It could potentially turn this type of an obligation into a Ribbis Daraisa. Similarly, if, for example, there's a certain due date in which you're supposed to pay something, and then there's an extension of the due date which is provided. So the Tazin Simon Kuf Ayin Vav, Sif Katan Ches, and the Chabis Tazin Simon Kuf Samach Vav, Sif Katan Dalet. They both say that that would also turn what is otherwise a purchase obligation into a Ribbis obligation, because of Zakvan Alav and Milveh, when there's an extension of the due date which is provided. And more obvious cases, if you have a certain obligation which is owed based on a purchase obligation, and the one who's owed the money, let's say that's the one who sold the goods, the storekeeper, the merchant is owed the goods, decides that he's going to memorialize this in a promissory note. So if it's memorialized in a promissory note, that also would be a case of Zakvan Alav B'Milveh. One also has to be very careful to avoid saying the amounts that you owe me. You could just say the purchase price will be such and such. When you use the Lashon Shatachayivli, it also creates certain questions. So that's important. But we're going to assume that all the cases that we're dealing with over here are the Mecher cases, which are subject to the various rules that we're going to outline. But it's important to know sometimes a Mecher obligation can be transformed through the principle of Zakvan Alav B'Milveh into a Hava that could implicate the Araisa issues, particularly if you hold that even if it wasn't at the actual time that it was extended, but just that the loan money was, or that the obligation was incurred, but at a later point in time, there is a stipulation, Machukas Rabim and Rosh, that could also implicate a Ribbis obligation. Now, there's a general principle that the Mishnah in Bava Metzia Daf Samachem and Aleph articulates, which is Ma'abin al Aschar ve'ein Ma'abin al Mecher. That we get to this idea, Ma'abin al Aschar means that when it comes to a schivus, so certainly of a house, you can actually stipulate two different prices. A fascinating thing. I'm renting out my apartment for the year, so I can rent it out for the year and say that you tenant are obligated to pay me $1,000 a month. So that'll come out to $12,000. But I say, if you want to pay me up front, normally we have a principle, Ein Skirus Mishalemis Ela B'Sof. Once upon a time, you could actually live in the apartment for the full year before having to pay anything. We'll get to the Chachma Sadon, who says maybe times have changed regarding this rule. But assuming that that's the general payment date, so I can give a discount. There's nothing intrinsically problematic with giving a discount if there is a transaction that takes place immediately. We'll get to the question, does the transaction actually take place immediately? Over here, different shiloh. But in this particular case, the Mishnah says that if I say that if you pay me up front, you only have to pay me $1,000, that's no problem. I can sell you something at any point in time for a lower amount of a price than what would normally be charged, as long as the merchandise is delivered immediately. That's never a problem. It's never a problem of Ribbis. If I sell something at a higher price to you and I sell you the money and you give me the money immediately, I sell you at a lower price to you and I sell it to you and you give me the money immediately. That's never a problem. Never, ever a problem. It's not a problem of Ribbis. It could be a problem of Onah. Could be a problem of Onah. It won't be a problem of Onah if everyone knows what the price is supposed to be, and we all agree that we're going to pay the extra amount, or that I, as the seller, am going to accept the discounted amount because I need the money. Everybody agrees to it, so fine, no problem. You get out of Onah. Never a Ribbis problem. This is a very important foundation of Hilchos Ribbis when it comes to any type of a mecher situation. If the goods are provided when the money is paid, or the money is paid when the goods are provided, when it happens hand in hand, that's not a Ribbis problem. It just could be illustrative of a Ribbis problem in the event that you wouldn't do it that way. You're going to do it in a different way, so then it could be illustrative. And that's the case. Ein Ma'abin ala Mecher. Ein Ma'abin ala Mecher is the case where normally I sell the item. I sell this item. It's a watch. I normally sell it for $20. So I give you the watch. But you say, I don't have the money now. I say, okay, no problem. You'll pay me a month from now $30. You'll pay me a month from now $30. So you can't do that because that's considered to be Ribbis. It's not a loan transaction. Nobody is loaning anybody anything. I'm selling you a watch. But instead of paying me today, you would only have to pay $20 if you bought it today. That's presumably the price. We assume the price that I charge today is the price that it really costs. However, if you pay me later on, Then that's going to be an extra amount of money. So it looks like ribbis. It looks like ribbis. So therefore, that's going to be forbidden. It's going to be forbidden on a Rabbanan level. Fine, good. So why is it ma bin ala schar? So ma bin ala schar because ain't skus mishlemes ela besof. So the real price is the price that you pay at the end, and otherwise it's just a discount. There's no ribbis involved. Fine, we sort of understand that for the time being. But ma bin ala mechu. It seems like it's not allowed. Comes along with Nachman and says, no, I have a way of making it permissible. I have a way of making it permissible. How are we going to make it permissible? If we do it in a secretive way. We do it in a secretive way. We do it in a way we're going to do. We're not going to tell anybody. We're not even going to tell each other. We're not even going to tell each other. What's the normal way that's prohibited? It's called tarsha. Tarsha means shh. Means it's silent. That's what tarsha means. It's silent. If you do it silent, you do it. It's called like a silent deal. So that's all right. If I was cuts, if I stipulated, I said, oh, you buy the watch today, it's $20, but you do it a month from now, so then it's $30. Well, then I've messed up. That's the case of the Mishnah. That's the case of the Mishnah. Rav Nachman says, but you're silent about it. You're silent. I figured out. I'm the seller of the watch. I figured out this guy's not going to pay me today because he's asking me, oh, how long do I have to pay? What's the amount of time I'm going to have to give you the money? I figured out he's not going to pay today. So I know in my head, if I would charge him today, I would charge him $20. But I don't say that to him. Mum is the word. I don't say that to him. All I say to him is, you know what? You pay me a month from now, it's $30. So in this particular case, there's no obvious ribbis. Nobody has to know that I would have accepted. I would have only charged $20 today. So it's not clear that since it's only Rabbanan anyway, going to be Mekel here. It's not clear that I'm charging extra because of the delay in payment. So that's perfectly okay. That's what the Gemara says. It says, oh, if I'm selling my field, I'm not allowed to say if you buy it today, it's going to be $1,000. But if you pay me 6 months from now, I'm giving you the field today. For sure, I'm giving it to you today. But if you pay me 6 months from now, it's going to be $1,200. That we know we're not allowed to do. That's Im Legon Mishnei Masamana. That's the Mishnah. However, in this particular case, nothing is stipulated. Hasam Kotzle, in that case, it was all spelled out. $1,000 today, $1,200 if you pay six months from now. Hachalo Kotzle. Here it wasn't spelled out. That's the secret of Rav Nachman. That's the tarsha of Rav Nachman, the silent interest of Rav Nachman. It's nice because Rav Nachman, the way in which, this is what we call a credit transaction. Credit. Tarsha is credit, right? So it's nice because the Gemara spells out, tarsha is mutter. I can do credit sales, which I'm charging more. I just can't be obvious about it. As long as I'm silent and secretive about it, that's perfectly okay. Rashi understands Tarsha. There are different ways of understanding Tarsha de Rav Nachman. The way in which we paskin lahalacha of Tarsha de Rav Nachman, the Shulchan Aruch, is the way Rashi understands it. There's an actual stipulation of the amount that's going to be paid later on. If Haigon says no, it's just whatever it's going to be worth at the time that it's paid. So we stipulate he'll pay that amount. Maybe it'll be worth more at that time. It'll be worth less at that time. It's karvla schar karvla hefsed. So if I go in for sure, Paskin's like Rav Nachman. It's no chiddush to Paskin like Rav Nachman if you understand the case that way. But the way in which Rashi understands the case is a little more innovative. It's more of a chiddush, and nonetheless the Shulchan Aruch Paskin's this way, which is that it's perfectly fine to say if you pay me a month from now, it's going to be $1,200. I'm spelling it out. That's what Rashi says. He says I don't say what it would be today if you pay me today, but I say if you pay me a month from now, it's going to the watch is going to cost more. Is going to cost the following amount. They say it's going to cost you $30, whatever. Okay, so that's the case of Tarsha. So it's very nice as long as I keep my lips sealed with respect to what I would have charged today. So it seems like everything is perfectly fine. But now Tosas points out there seems to be a problem from another thing that Rav Nachman said. The Gemara has three tarshas, by the way. It's the tarsha of Papa, the tarsha of Rav Chama, it's the tarsha of Rav Nachman. So the tarsha of Rav Chama, which is that I give people merchandise that they should sell it in the shuk, should sell it in the marketplace to a certain price where they'll sell it. It'll get more of a price for the merchandise than you can get over here. So that's perfectly okay. Why is it okay? Because I'm taking responsibility for the merchandise until the point in time in which they sell it. So the loan doesn't actually take place until the point in time in which they sell the merchandise, and at that point in time, that's when the money is coming in. So that's not a problem. It's only a problem if the merchandise is coming to them prior to the point in time in which they would have to pay for it. But here they're getting it's my responsibility, and if anything happens to the merchandise, I'm taking responsibility. Rav Chama is certainly not a chiddush. The Gemara says Hilchos Rav Chama, but the Gemara elsewhere says that we don't hold like the Tarsha of a Papa. That's the Tarsha de Papunai. We don't hold like Rav Papa held that if I'm this watch salesman and I say to you, listen, it's $100, it's $20 if you buy the watch today. You're going to take a month from now. It's $30, but I know for myself, I don't. I'm happy to hold the watch. I don't need the money right now. I don't need that you give me $20 right now or $30 later. I'm happy to hold on to the watch. The watch, nothing's going to happen to the watch. I'm not worried that it's going to spoil. It's going to go bad. It's going to get broken. I'm happy to hold on to the watch, and I'm happy, and I know that I'm going to get the $30 if I wait a month from now, because that's what the price is going to be a month from now. So therefore, I'm not gaining anything. So says the Gemara, that's nice, you're not gaining anything, but the purchaser, he's losing something. If he would pay me today, he would only have to pay $20. If he pays me a month from now, he'll have to pay $30. We look at the purchaser, we don't look at the fact that I'm not losing out. Okay, so that's Rav Papa. For Rav Nachman, okay, so Rav Nachman is my normal credit to a sale transaction. I'm just not opening up my mouth. But the Gemara B'Metzia Daf Samach Yomim Beis seems to have a problem with the Tarsha, seems to go against this Tarsha of Rav Nachman. And the one who contradicts Rav Nachman is none other than Rav Nachman himself. Rav Nachman says, I'll tell you something else. Well, we know that a nice watch, so that's worth something, right? Person will pay $20 for a nice watch, $30 for a nice watch, maybe even more money for a nice watch, right? But you know what's really, valuable? We're going to spell out balls of wax. Like, who doesn't want balls of wax? So balls of wax, that's what we call kirah. So kirah, normally the balls of wax, it would go for 4 balls of wax for 1 zuz. Okay, 4 balls of wax for 1 zuz, and that's the normal market price. How do I understand the normal market price? It seems that way. He says, "High mind the yav zuzuli kira." Somebody gives a zuz to buy balls of wax because the abba. Normally, you get 4 balls of wax for the zuz. So that's what you normally get. How do I know you normally get it? It must be, it's known. It must be that's the market price. It must be it's known, right? But amalei yehibna la chamesh chamesh, and I say to the person who's paying that you know what. You give me your zuzah today. I don't have the balls of wax today. But you know what? If you give me the zuz today, so then I'll give you 5 balls of wax tomorrow. Normally you get 4 balls of wax. I can give you 5 balls of wax. What do we call that? That's called a prepayment discount. Prepayment discount. What do you know? Okay, now we have our second case. This is the case of Huzla. Huzla's prepayment discount. So is this okay? So no. Here the Gemara says that it depends. Sometimes it's okay, sometimes it's not okay. You know when it's going to be okay? It's going to be okay if a tanu gabe shari. In the event that the person who is selling the balls of wax has the balls of wax, so that I'm going to give you balls of wax tomorrow, but I don't want to deplete my inventory. I'm going to get more balls of wax. But right now, I do have 5 balls of wax in my inventory. I don't want to give you the balls of wax until tomorrow. I'm going to get 1,000 more balls of wax in my inventory. I don't want to give up my entire inventory today. But the Maisa, I do have the 5 balls of wax. Since I have the 5 balls of wax, so therefore, when the person gives me the zuz, it's considered as if what? As if what? It's considered as if he acquired it. Well, he didn't necessarily acquire these balls of wax. I can give him different balls of wax. So I'm going to maintain responsibility for the balls of wax. He gets a little bit of an advantage here, but we're only dealing with Ribbis Rabbanan, right? So therefore, we can go after Dinei Torah to be make over here. What's the Din Torah? The Din Torah is Mos Konos. He gives me the money. I have balls of wax. It's considered to be as if he's bought balls of wax. So hey, maybe not these balls of wax, other balls. Well, it could be these balls of wax because I have the balls of wax. So it's considered like he already acquired it. He can back out of the transaction. There's no mashicha. He can back out of the transaction. He could say, "Give me my zuz back. I don't want your balls of wax. What are balls of wax worth anyway? Come on." So he can back out. But nonetheless, because if he backs out, what's he going to get? If he backs out, you're going to get a mishapara. So the Rivash, quoted by the Beis Yosef, said, no, he's going to get a mishapara. So therefore, it's considered as if some sort of a transaction has already taken place. So therefore, Itanu, this is the heter of Yeshlo. So here I have, with respect to a prepayment discount situation, if it's Yeshlo, the mocher has the merchandise. And that's some of the merchandise. In a sub transaction, if the person who's borrowing 20 potatoes has 1 potato, so that's good enough for him to be allowed to pay back 20 potatoes, right? That's a sub transaction. It has something to do with katina dabai, but we don't. But here it's mamish a sale transaction. It's a sale transaction. It's not a loan transaction where you could keep on taking the value and then giving it back to the person, taking it back and giving it, and taking it back and giving it, and so forth, like katina dabai. Here it's a sale transaction, so you have to have the whole thing. So we have to be all 5 balls of wax. But what? But if the seller at the time of the prepayment discount doesn't have the 5 balls of wax in his possession, then it's usher. So we say it's pshita that it's usher. I mean, obviously it's because you have a case where it's clear that today the person we get 4 balls of wax, but because of the fact that because I'm getting I'm getting an advantage. I'm getting the money up front, and he's waiting for his merchandise. So I'm going to give him an extra because of the fact that I get an extra day before I have to pay him his merchandise. So I am therefore benefiting I'm sorry. I'm therefore obligating myself to pay him another ball of wax. So that clearly looks like ribbis. So it's a pshita. So we say, no, this is, even though there are people who owe me balls of wax, but it's not considered to be like it's in my possession. But because if, like, let's say I had balls of wax, but it wasn't immediately available, I had to open up a warehouse in order to get my balls of wax. So that's considered my possession. I just have to take out my key. That's okay. But, or I get my key from my son or whatever it is. So that would be considered like it's in my possession. The chiddush is, if even though somebody owes it to me, that's not considered to be my possession, fine, because it's considered to be mechusa gavaina. So Tosfos asked the question. Tosfos says that im timer, why is it that it's also altogether? Didn't we just get through saying that in the case of Tarsha, it's really the same thing? What's the difference in the case of Tarsha? Tarsha, person who's the purchaser, is paying me a little bit extra money. In the case of Huzla, case of Kira, the one who's the seller is paying extra merchandise. Mali hate, mali demand, just to use the term out of context, that Neshakol davar asher yishach. Ribbis applies if I'm giving too much money. Ribbis applies if I'm giving too much merchandise. So really, the two cases should be essentially identical. It's two sides of the same coin. It's just really an identical situation. But there we said it's okay if the person is careful not to be mefarish. So why don't we say the same thing over here? That if I am selling my balls of wax at a discount, I'm just not going to be mefarish. I'm not going to tell you, that if I would pay, if it would be right away, I give you 4 balls of wax. But because of the fact that you're allowing me this extra day, that's why I'm giving you 5 balls of wax. As long as it's not spelled out, it should be perfectly permissible. We said that all that matters when I have a credit transaction, this is just sort of a reverse type of credit transaction. The credit's not for the money, it's for the merchandise. So why shouldn't it be the same thing as long as you're not mefarish? You might not be Tarsha Rav Nachman. That it should be as long as you don't spell out that today it would only be 4 balls of wax. So why is it that this is going to be more problematic? So says Tosfos is very important. You saw it. He says that the case of Tarsha is not as simple as we thought it was. It's not like all credit transactions are going to be hunky-dory as long as your mom is the word, as long as you keep your little secret. No, if everybody knows the secret, so then it's considered as if you are mefarish. It's considered the equivalent to being explicit and spelling it out. How did we start out describing the case? We said that the case was because arba arba. That's what the Gemara said. Because arba arba. That everyone, this is what balls of wax go for. If you opened up the stock exchange pages in the Wall Street Journal and you see what the prices of the commodities are selling for today, you'll see balls of wax. It's for the balls of wax for a zuz. That's what it says. Just like I sometimes look and see how much is a gram of silver selling for, so I'll know how much to charge for pidyon abein money. It's all published. It's the Yatza Shar. We know what the market price is with respect to the balls of wax. So that's considered kitmet parish. It's considered as if it has actually been spelled out. Ki'ilu pirish. It's considered ki'ilu pirish. It may actually pachos in zman poloni b'yaiser. So then Tosfos is not done. Tosfos is going to spell out some other thing. All of these are chumras. Tosfos is saying that the credit transaction case is going to be subject to the same chumras as the prepayment discount case. If it's considered to be equivalent to mefarish here, by the prepayment discounts, is going to be considered to be mefarish there in the case of the credit transactions, if everybody knows what it goes for. The fee says Tosfos, Lo Sharav Nachman the command Tarsha, Rav Nachman was only Mako and Daf Samachayam and Aleph. This is the case of Kiros and Samach Gimel and Beis. Ela B'Darash Ein Shemasa Yudua. It must be something where people don't know how much it's worth. Ooh, Tosas just threw in something else. What did Tosas throw in? So because there are two ways that I can know the price of something. I can know the price of something because I look at the newspaper, I look at the commodity exchange, and it tells me that this is the price. That's one way of knowing the price. There's another way of knowing the price of something. Everybody just knows. They know this is what it's worth. There's a range for a ball of wax you can get 3, you can get 4 balls of wax, but nobody gets 5 balls of wax for a zuz. Everybody knows that that's beyond the range. If it's a shumasa, even if it's in something where it's not yatsa hashar, it's never yatsa hashar, but it's a shumasa yudua. Everybody knows that I don't know that there is necessarily a market for my cell phone, but everybody knows that my cell phone is worth the following amount of money because it has all this confidential business information. So people are willing to spend a lot of money on it. But whatever it is, let's say that they know how much it is. They might not know. If they don't know, so then it's fine. So then I could sell it in a credit transaction. I might get into trouble. But from a Ribbis perspective, it would be okay if it's an ancient muscle you do it's lo yatsa or shar, and I'm not mefarish. So it turns out that in order for tarsha to be mutter, this is what we learned from Kira. We learned from Kira that in order for tarsha to be mutter, not only does it have to be a case where the person was not mefarish, but number 2, it has to be a case where lo yatsa or shar, and number 3, says Tosus, it has to be a case where it is Ein Shemasa Yudua. It has to be a case of Ein Shemasa Yudua. But if it's a case of Ein Shemasa Yudua, so then it's going to be perfectly okay, right? Now, this is kind of interesting because now we can go back to Tarsha and say, what am I learning from Tarsha to the case of Kira? So I'm learning from Tarsha, number 1, if I'm Mefarish, so then it's going to be a problem because we said Mefarish is always a problem. So then, since Mefarish is always a problem, we learned that in the case of Tarsha, that's going to be a problem. Guess what? Even if Yeshlo, that's going to be a problem because that's what we learned from Tarsha. Whatever the restrictions with respect to Tarsha, so those are going to be restrictions with respect to Kira as well. And here's sort of like the funny part, and this is something which is not sort of explicit within Tosfos, but the Ramah assumes this. The Ramah assumes this the halacha. The Beis Yosef assumes this the halacha. The Beis Yosef writes this. The Ramah assumes this. He writes this in his Dark Emotion. He publishes it in his in the Shulchan Aruch. The Ramah says that so the same way that Ein Shemasa Yudua works in the case of a credit sale, as long as I'm not mefarish, it doesn't. So too, if I have this situation where my particular item is Ein Shemasa Yudua, so that's going to work in a discount sale as well. In the case of Kira, if my particular item, the balls of wax, there's no shara for it. Nobody knows what the balls of wax are. So that's going to be perfectly permissible as well. Is that like a chiddush? Well, it might be a chiddush because of case number 3. Yes, question. What? Is in what mutter? If he has it, it's mutter, but not in a case of mefarish. Not in a case of mefarish, because whatever the restrictions with respect to Tarsha are going to be restrictions with respect to Kira as well. So I'm learning one from the other. We're saying that that if I would have a type of situation where a person is mefarish, so even if everything else is hunky-dory, right? Because in the Tarsha case, it has to be that it's lo yatsa shar. It has to be that I have all it's Ein Shemasa Yudua. I have everything else is perfect, and I'm still not allowed to be mefarish. So I would say the same thing with respect to Kira. That even if everything else is perfect, I'm still not allowed to be mefarish. I'm still not allowed to be mefarish. But I understand the question, but that's the assumption. Now, if you take a look in source 6 over here, there's a Tosas above Metzia. This is where the Gemara says the halacha is karav chama. So we just pointed out Halacha is like Rav Chama, because Rav Chama was giving his merchandise to be sold in the market, and he's still taking responsibility to the point in time in which it's sold. And even though they're doing a favor for him, he's essentially loaning them merchandise, and they're paying him back in terms of the value that they're getting. It's worth 12 zuz when they sell it. So they're giving that back to him. So they're doing him a favor. They're getting a benefit. It's like a schar tircha. What's their schar tircha? The benefit they get, that they're going to get their taxes off because they're selling Rav Chama's merchandise. So everybody who sells Rav Chama's merchandise gets to sell their wares in the shukah tax free, and also they're going to be the first ones to be allowed in the market to sell in the marketplace because of their pedigree. So therefore they're going to get a benefit. So Lacha is clearly like Rav Chama. So the Tosfos says, oh, I'm sorry, his question. Then in the case of Kira, shouldn't be mutter even Shom Te'edo. Like Tosfos' question was on his aim with Elo. In the case of Kira, or is Tosfos is asking the question: why is it going to be usher in the case of Elo? And why don't we learn from the case of Tarsha? And he explains because it's considered to be like the equivalent of because it's considered to be like the equivalent of mefarish because we know that it's yatsa hashar. So yeah. No, but I still need for there to be a sort of a reality in which there are no factors that are going to make it like it's mefarish. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're saying that if I have a case of Yotza Hashar, so then it's as if it was Mefarish. And we see that it's still mutter in the event that we have Yeshlo. We see that it's still mutter. True, it's a good point. But the poskim say that in any event, because of the fact that we see that an explicit Mefarish is always problematic in the case of Tarsha, we carry that over. Okay, so that's the halakha, but you're right, you could make that argument. Now, if you take a look at Tosfos over here, Tosfos in Samachei Amibes, Tosfos points out that since we only said that we don't paskin like the Tarsha de Papunai, so it's clearly do paskin like the Tarsha like Rav Nachman. And he says that the case of the reason why Papunai was explicitly spelled out was because that's talking about even when it's been made explicit, right? Or the shar is kavua, which is considered to be the equivalent of it being cuts. It's considered to be the equivalent when I have a yatsa hashar is considered like it was cuts. But if the case of Rav Nachman is special and different because of the fact that Rav Nachman's case is specifically talking about where it was low cuts, where it was not spelled out, and that this is the Iker Nekuda. If you look at the way that it's codified in the Shulchan Aruch, this is the Tarsha of Rav Nachman, Shulchan Aruch, the Kuf Ayin Gimel, Sif Aleph, Machal Chaybeiro, Davar Shishava Asar Zum Miyud Beis, B'Shil Shemamtin Lo, Asar, okay? I'm blah blah. That's the case. Afilu imamokev ashir ve'enot sarach lamos lo. This is the case of Tasha Rav Nachman, right? Afilu imamokev ashir ve'enot sarach lamos lo hayasai skover nefsedes eslo. This is the case of a papa. V'merdrim mamumim b'davar sheish lo shar yedua u'davar sheshumasa yedua. So Shulchan Aruch says that carrying over this idea of Tosfos, that it's going to be also whenever I have a shar yedua, whenever I have, or I have a shumasa yadua. Either there's a market price or everybody knows exactly how much it is. But if I'm dealing with like a tablet, something, cell phone, people don't know exactly what the shar yadua is. As long as you don't say explicitly, now, comes along the Mechaber, and the Mechaber throws in one other factor, one other condition. What's the other condition? The condition is that in a credit transaction, even if you're not mefarish, you don't say anything, the same way that if it's a yatsa hashar, it's considered like you're saying something. If it's shumasa you do, it's considered like you're saying something, what it's worth today, and you're just charging more because the person is paying later. If you're going to charge a ridiculous, exorbitant amount, So even if it's ain't shemasa yadua, but there's a certain limit, there's a certain range that these things that generally will cost. And if it's clearly way above the range, let's say way above whatever would be the normal threshold of no, 20% is what a lot of posts can say. If it's real estate, it's an extra, you're charging more than double. So if it's somewhere in that range, so that's also going to be also because that's also ki'ilu pirish. It's ki'ilu pirish because nobody sells for those ridiculous prices. Nobody sells for those ridiculous prices. So therefore, that's also considered to be kimafarish ra'aser. And the Gra explains that that's also considered to be shemasa yadua she'ein darka lahosif kokach, because people don't generally add so much extra from what otherwise would have been charged. So even if the person is completely silent and they would have figured, okay, it's within the range of what people might, sometimes charge, it's so ridiculous in terms of what anybody would reasonably charge in normal circumstances that it's clear that it's only happening because of the credit. Now, when the Shulchan Aruch codifies the case of Huzla, that's Siman Kuf Ayin Gimel Siv Zayin, a little bit later in the same Siman. In Kona Davish Shava Yud Beis B'Yud B'Shoshim Aktimos, Yeshem Mechus B'Shus Meicher El She'enu Matzli Lo Achiyavu B'No. If it's in the Mocher has his 5 balls of wax already, so that it's going to be mutter. V'Me'eno B'Shuso Aser Afilu Yeshlo B'Yosa Davar Kafa B'Yad Acherim V'Eno Meshuso, it's going to be Aser. Says the Rama, V'Chol Zed Lo Sharei Lo B'Stam. The Rama says that when it's going to be mutter, namely, what's the case like? The case is yeshlo, right? The case is yeshlo. When it's going to be mutter, it's only mutter b'stam, aval im mefarish aser. But if the person spells it out, it's going, it's going to be aser. Why is that? Because of the fact that the same way that we have that the case of kira is a bala lamed, what the conditions are going to be in the case of Tasha, it's an imsalamed. It also picks up whatever are the restrictions in the case of Tasha, and that also we're going to apply even in the heter cases, even in those cases that would otherwise be permissible. So again, you can ask your kasha on the Ramah as well, but the Maisa, that's how we pass it. That it's balalamed and imsalamed is the way that I would put it. It comes along the Ramah. He says, I'm not done yet. I gave you a chumrah. Now I'm going to give you a kula. I gave you a chumrah. What was the chumrah that I gave you? I gave you this chumrah that mefarish, even if yeshlo, mefarish is always going to be us. So I gave you a chumrah. Now I'm going to give you a kula. I pointed out that the case of Rav Nachman must be talking about ancient master yudua. So we see that's what Tosa said. So we see ancient master yudua is a heter. Oh, if ancient master yudua is a heter, so then that's going to end up being a heter, even in the case of the discounted transaction as well. And this sends off a frenzy. Everybody on the page goes wild over this particular Ramah. Like if you open up your Shulchan Aruch, you're going to hear a lot of commotion when you get up to this line of the Ramah. So what's going on over here? What's the case of Huzla is like the most problematic case where I have a prepayment discount. The person is giving me money up front, and as a result, he's getting extra merchandise. This is very, very problematic that he's getting extra merchandise. So everyone knows that normally this isn't what the sale price is, and nonetheless, we have certain heterim. Yeah. What's the heter? The heter will be yeshlo. Okay, yeshlo we understand. It's considered as if the transaction already took place. Yeshlo is fine, but what's the sort of the softer version? The softer version of the case of Huzla. The softer version of the case of Huzla is none other than the case of psika. What's psika? Psika is a prepayment, but it's not a prepayment discount. The way that Rabbi Reisman puts it is very nice. He calls it guaranteed low price. A guaranteed low price. A person pays me right now. This is what the market price is. He's paying me the market price there. But the only thing is, I'm not giving him the merchandise today. I'm going to give him a month from now. So certainly, if in the case of what's the main heter in this particular case, what exactly would cause a chumrah in the case of Huzla is going to cause a kula in the case of psika. And what's that? If there is a shar. In Yotzar Shar, and that's what the Mishnah says. If it was Yotzar Shar, so then that's going to be perfectly fine. This is the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Beis and Beis. Ain't poskin al peiros achi Yotzar Shar. Yotzar Shar poskin avav b'shein l'zeh yesh l'zeh. That I give money to somebody that I want to receive 20 bushels of wheat. So I'm going to get and he says, good, I'll give you the bushels of wheat next month. So I say, well, the 20 bushels of wheat today are worth $10 for 20 bushels of wheat. Maybe a month from now it'll be worth $15. I want to lock in the price. No problem. The price is locked in. You give me the $10, the price is locked in. Why is that mutter? You say it's mutter because what do I need to rely upon this fellow for? I could say Shekila Tibusek Rashad Yachizri. That's what the Gemara in Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis says. I could say I don't. I can take my money and I can go to the marketplace and buy the bushels right now. So I'm not relying upon his generosity. I could just pick up the bushels of wheat right now. Secondly, he could take my $10 and he could go to the market and pick up the 20 bushels of wheat. So therefore, on some level, it's considered as if he already has the 20 bushels of wheat because he can easily go to the market and pick up the 20 bushels of wheat. So therefore, that's the reason why Yotza Ashar is a heter. So that's the heter. That's the only heter. The only heter. We don't have any other heter. I mean, obviously, the other heter would be yeshlo. Yeshlo. If a yeshlo works in the case of huzla, kavachoma yeshlo is going to work in the case of a psika, right? That if I'm going to give him the $10 and he doesn't even have to go to the marketplace where there's a clear market price and all the stores are selling the 20 bushels of wheat for $10, he has the 20 bushels of wheat himself. He just decides that he's going to give it to me a month from now. I'd be happy to get it today, but he decides he's going to give it to me a month from now, and I agree to it as long as I can lock in the price. So that's fine because that's considered as if he already transferred it to me. That's the Ribbis and the Beis Yosef that we quoted already. That's not a question, right? But who's law? What? But I'm sorry. But ancient Masa Yudua. Ancient Masa Yudua. Where do we have that in the Mishnah? Mishnah just says that I have one heter with respect to psika, which is that it has to be the Yotza Hashar. If it's not a case of Yeshlo, so then it has to be Yotza Hashar. So it sounds like that if the Shar was not Yotze, so then and it's Amo, the merchant doesn't have the produce right now, so then I don't have a heter. So the Taz says that Olam Hafach Reisi. Olam Hafach Reisi. There's no heter of Ein Shumaso Yudua when it comes to Psika, where you're paying the market price today, and there is a heter when it comes to Huzla of Ein Shumaso Yudua, where you're paying less than what the market price, less than no market price, you're paying less than what normally the person would sell it for, and as a result, you're getting extra merchandise in the end. Here, in the case of Psika, you're just getting the amount of merchandise that you paid for, what the market price is today. In the case of Huzla, that's already a discount. That's not a guaranteed low price that you're paying what it's worth today. You're paying less than what it would normally be sold for. Even if there's no shah, you're paying less than what it would normally be sold for. And there, in that particular case, how can you get a benefit that you wouldn't get in the case of Psika? So Taz says it makes no sense. Therefore, I disagree. Therefore, I object, Your Honor. Taz says I object. And Taz says I object in many, many words. He must take up about 60 lines that he says he objects. I only have like half of the Taz here, or maybe 1/3 of the Taz. But he keeps on and on and on. He says it makes absolutely no sense. This is going to be like a Ribbis Hanikeres. Because why is that? Because eventually the shah is going to come out. You're going to see that the person paid an amount for which he's getting a big benefit because of the fact that it's going to be worth, the merchandise will be worth more, and he's going to nonetheless have locked in this lower price in the case of Huzla, and because ancient Masa you do it, it's not going to be right, because just if you can't do it by Psika, Kavachom, you can't do it by Huzla. So the Shach says, no problem, I have an easy solution for you. He says, when the Ramah says that it's mutter in the case of Huzla, of a prepayment discount, if the person pays up front, and it was Ein Shemasa Yudua, we're talking about Kfar Yatza Shar. Of course, in the case of, we're not going to be more Makel by Huzla, we by Psika. So Psika, we're only Makel if it's Ein if it's Yatza Hashar. So here too, of course, it's Yatza Hashar. It's Yatza Hashar, Yatza Hashar, Yatza Hashar, and he's paying less to get more merchandise at the end than what the Shar would permit. This is going to be permissible. This is exactly what should be the opposite of the case. We already said that's considered to be like mefarish. It's considered to be like mefarish. If there is a shar, there is the shar says I get 4 balls of wax, and because I paid up front, I'm going to get 5 balls of wax. That's considered to be like mefarish. So for sure that should be usher. How could the shach say such a thing? But he does. You think I'm kidding you? The Shach actually says it. Look, Kufay and Gimel Siv Kelting Yuzai, he says that I can't make Huzla more lenient than I would make Psika if Ancient Masa Yudua doesn't work with respect if I need Yatza Ashar with respect to the case of psika. So in the case of huzla, if it's an ein lo situation, I must require yatsa shar as well. Pashul fizeki shavida mein shemasin yedua afilu be'ein lo. Nami biyatsa shar bedavki. So it must be. So he says, I have an easy answer to the Taz's kasha. It must be talking about where is yatsa shar. Comes along Rabbi Kiva Eger says, this is insane. What's going on over here? Yatsa shar is exactly what you can have. That was Tosfos. You can't have yatsa shar when I'm dealing with this. That's the case of kiwa. That kufa is the case of kiwa. You can't have that. So he says to me, Hani, I'm a honey ain't shemasi do hakim in the yatsa shar. He says, if it's yatsa shar, he says that for sure is going to be a problem. It's like you're being mefarish, that I would give 4 balls of wax today, but I'm going to give you 5 balls of wax tomorrow. Who cares if it's 8 shemasa you do it? He says that it's yatsa shar. Yatsa shar means that we know that today you would get 4 balls of wax because you could look in the newspaper. So so this is absolutely insane. Who comes along to rescue the day? So the Baragola normally is very quiet and just tends to his own business. He just gives you Maramakomos on the side, unless he's like, very upset about the way people are doing business with Goyim. But otherwise, he's like pretty quiet. He doesn't normally, get stirred up about anything. But he says, I can't be silent. This page of the Shulchan Aruch is falling apart. So the Baragola gives you a simple explanation. It's like the story of it was a young child, who just wouldn't talk at all. Got to the age of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and it seemed normal in every other way. Just never had any words come out of his lips. Took the child to all the specialists, and the specialists couldn't understand what the child didn't speak. And one day they're having dinner around the table, and the child says, "Could somebody please pass the salt?" They said, "I don't understand. You never opened up your mouth until now." He said, "Up until now, everything was fine." So it's the same thing. Baragola, up until now, everything was fine. He says, now things are falling apart. So let me explain to you. I'll explain to you. He says that what are we talking about? If the concern was, like the Taz registered, that it's that eventually it's going to be Yatza Hashar, so then of course you would have what to worry about. That it's going to be the shar is going to reveal a higher market price, and the person is going to get a bonanza. But he says over here we're talking about an ein shemasa you do a situation where there's no shar now, and there's never ever going to be a shar. There's never going to be a shar. So if I'm dealing with a situation where there's never going to be a shar, not only is that going to be mutter in the case of huzla, it's also going to be mutter in the case of psika. It's going to be a mutter in both situations. He says that in this particular case, a par vitalis is just going on some cow and talis where we don't know how much it's worth. Every par and talis is based on the size and the shape and the make. It's going to have a different type of a value. That he's not going to, we're not going to know what the value is, not the time in which the merchant is the owner of these items receives the money, and he's not going, and nobody's going to know the value at the time in which they're actually delivered. Because we're not talking about a specific item. If we be talking about a specific item, that the seller is, that the purchaser is buying a specific item, so then he buys it from day one and he takes responsibility for it, and then I don't have a Ribbis shiloh altogether. Here we're talking about the whole transaction is one when I'm not dealing with any particular specific item. Specific items, the Chazon Ish writes, they're not subject to Ribbis as long as the lokech is going to take responsibility for that. That's the idea of buying a specific item. But he says it's not a specific item, and so therefore there's never going to be a Yatza Shar. There's never going to be a Yatza Shar, so therefore this is going to be a heter, ain't shemasin yudua, and this is never going to be a market price for this type of an item. It's always going to be mutter bain in the situation of psika, where whatever price is going for today, you stipulate that's what is being paid, and it doesn't matter if the price fluctuates afterwards. And even if it's known that today the person would sell it for a lower price, as long as it's not explicitly stated that he would sell it for a lower price, and he says that, or he would sell it for a higher price if we're talking about merchandise, and he just says, I'll give you the 5 balls of wax instead of saying I'm going to give you the 4 balls of wax because he's paying it later. That's going to be mutter, both in the case of that would be mutter in any case, ein shemas on yudua, whether I'm dealing with psika, even if it's lo yatsa shar, and certainly and the chiddush is even in the case of huzla, that would be mutter as well, and therefore it's not a kasha whatsoever. Fine. But so all of that is perfectly fine. Now, none of this means, so it's very interesting, because it turns out that we learn from every single one of the cases certain principles that we apply to all the other cases. So we learn, for example, in the case of Tarsha, we learn that Mefarish is a problem, and we carry that over. Mefarish is going to be a problem when it comes to Huzla. When we learn in the case of the Huzla that Yatza Hashar is going to be considered to be the equivalent of Mefarish, and we learn that Shumasa Yudua is going to be the equivalent of Mefarish, and we carry that over to Tarsha, that Tarsha is only going to be permissible when we don't have those factors. We learn from the case of Kira that Yeshlo is going to be a heter, and if Yeshlo is a heter with respect to the case of Kira Huzla, certainly it's going to be a heter with respect to Psika. We learn from the case of Psika that Yatza Hashar is going to be a heter. In the event that there isn't sort of an extra price that's being paid, but it's actually the market value that's going to work for Psika. And the Shach assumes that therefore, if I'm going to be Mako, in the case of Ein Shumas or Yudua, in the case of Huzla, I would also have to require Yatza Hashar, but since that really doesn't seem to make any sense, it makes more sense to learn in the other direction, to say, since we see that Ein Shumas or Yudua works for Kira, which we know from the fact that we saw it had to be the case with respect to Tarsha, so it must be that Ein Shumas or Yudua works with respect to Psika as well, and the reason why it works, as the Baragol explains, is because in the case of Ein Shumas or Yudua, we're talking about a case where you're never going to know the shah. There never is going to be a particular market price in any of these cases. Now, we said at the beginning that in the event that, like, I have a skira situation where it's a skiris mishlemes el b'sof, so we said that the lower price that's paid up front is not going to be a problem because that's just a discount. And the real price is the price that's paid later on. So the question is, what if I have other situations where the real price is the price that's paid later on, and I'm able to determine that what's paid up front is really just a discount? So here, if there's a safer, I turned to Beagle Eisen a couple of months ago, and I asked Beagle Eisen if I were Beagle Eisen whether he could recommend, the latest, greatest Svarim on Ribbis, what he recommends. So he recommended a few really good ones. Two of the Svarim that he recommended were the Bris Pinchas by Pinchas Vind, who's a prolific writer when it comes to Hilchos Ribbis. He's very, very good, very nice little sefer. One of them was the Mishpat Ribbis by Rav Aaron Vider. So I have there's also a Otzer Hilchos Ribbis, which is also very, very impressive. So I picked up all those different volumes. So I saw in the Mishpat Haribis by Rav Vider. So he talks about the situation which Rabbi Reisman has in his book as well. It's sort of a complicated business sort of structure. I mean, it's complicated. Just the word is complicated. The phrase is complicated. It's not actually complicated. But it's called like 1/10 net 30 or 2/10 net. No, there's both. If you look on the Investopedia page, so the more common deal nowadays is a 1/10 net 30, but he talks about the 2/10 net 30. So what does that mean? It means that normally when you have a merchandise, which is a certain type of merchandise that is sold, so the person gets the merchandise, and it's understood that he's going to pay 30 days later. But the merchant says, you know what? If you pay within the first 10 days, so then I'll give you a 2% discount. That's the 2/10 net 30. That within the first 10 days, I'll give you a 2% discount. 1/10 net 30 means that within the first 10 days, I'll give you a 1% discount. So people are not, as generous as they used to be. So now the 1/10 net 30 is more common. And there were a number of poskim spoke. This was true. It had some Yiddish name also that I can't pronounce. But this was the type of transaction that was very, very common already going back a couple of 100 years. The Imre Yosha wrote about it already. The Imre Yosha writes about this type of transaction that he thinks it's perfectly fine. Why is it perfectly fine? Because he says that this is a situation where this is the custom in the marketplace. The custom in the marketplace is that everybody generally pays later. So therefore, if you provide an early discount, then it's clear that that's not the real price. The real price is what you are paying later on, and what you're paying early on. If you would pay on that day, that's just considered to be a discount. And since the person's getting the merchandise, so it's not like a shaila of a Kira situation when you pay early and you're getting more merchandise later. It's just the merchandise is being given at the time that it's paid. So that's fine. The discount transaction is always mutter, as we pointed out, when the person gets the merchandise right away. So the issue is, do I say that it's always the case that whenever there is sort of like the option of paying upfront for a certain price, that even after generally speaking, people do pay later, we say that the price that's paid up front, if it's not a schiras transaction like renting real estate, that really is the real price. That really is the real price. So that's a big question. So Rabbi Reisman claims that it's really the real price. And it's very interesting because I looked on the Investopedia page. The Investopedia page says that this is still a common way of doing commercial transactions. I'm not so familiar. I don't remember from my law firm days such a thing. But he says that it's still, a way in which people do commercial transactions. But he said that for legal and tax purposes, it's treated as a short-term loan. It's treated as a short-term loan, and therefore the amount extra that's getting paid when the person doesn't take advantage of the discount is actually considered to be an interest benefit for the merchant. That's what it says in the Investopedia. So the Investopedia completely substantiates what Rabbi Reisman said. It's a very, very interesting thing. Very interesting thing. But if I really did have a type of a credit transaction where people normally pay late, so in theory, you could say that that's the real price. The Ramah has such a situation. You could say then that's real, but in many, many situations, the post can really point out that generally speaking, if there is sort of a standing option to pay up front, for a lesser price, then we generally will assume that's the real price. We generally will assume that is the real price. The Chai Adam has a chiddush in which he says that in the event that, let's say, this is a bigger chiddush, truthfully. He says that this is in source 19, the Chai Adam the Chai Adam says that in the event that I would have an item which is sold universally in all the stores for a particular price, but I have a person who's a merchant. Normally he sells the wares in the store, but now he happens to be home and there's a neighbor that wants to buy these wares, wants to buy it. And he says, the truth of the matter is that I need the money and I don't want to have to wait for the end of the month when they're going to tally up all the inventory and I'll get my cut of the dividends, whatever it is. I want to just make a quick sale right now. And if you pay me you pay me right away right now, instead of going to the store, I'm prepared to pay you. I'm prepared to accept a lesser amount. I'm prepared to accept a lesser amount for the merchandise. But if you're not going to pay me right away, so then I'm just going to charge you the regular amount. So it says that the Chachmas Adam, even though the person is mefarish, the person spells out. He says, "You pay me right now. I'm going to give it to you for $10. You wait until you're in the store and you pay it then, or you're going to pay me according to the normal course later on to $12, which is what we charge there. So then, if you're going to pay me later on, then I'm going to charge you $12." So says the Chachmas Adam, "Apagash mefarish mutter shezer rotze lahosel b'shalamos." He says that it's clear that since this is the amount that's being charged in all the stores, just the merchant is saying that if you pay me, right now, and I don't have to wait for all the sale in the stores, so I'll take $10. But if you're not going to pay me right now, so I'll give you the merchandise, but you'll have to pay me $12 like everybody else. So then it's clear this is what the merchandise goes for. So here, the Chachmas Adam finds less. I would say supporters in terms of this particular case. Even the Bris Pinchas, who's more inclined to be makel with respect to the 110 net 30 case, is not inclined to be makel with respect to this case. Why is that? Because in the 110 net 30 case, that's a case where everybody pays late. And an exception is being made to allow this person to pay early. Here, in this particular case, is a case where everybody pays on time. It's just that most of the people are buying in the store. This person, now the merchant, is saying, I'm willing to pay it for you less, but he's stipulating two different prices. So at least with respect to this particular transaction, when he sells outside of the store, so the first price that he's mentioning is the real price for purposes of this transaction, and the other price is a Ribbis price, basically, or a Ribbis to a button price that he is charging more for the credit transaction, because this is not a situation where a person typically pays late. But in a situation, if you really could kind of find a situation where the general understanding is to pay late, and then only afterwards there's sort of a negotiation. Or if you pay me early, I'll charge you less. So that's where you have a little bit more of a machlokes, where even though the chokmas, even though the 110 net 30 case, as I said, Rabbi Reisman's view seems to carry the day, everyone would agree that in the event that the transaction had already been completed, that I already sold the merchandise to somebody with the understanding that pay me to, $12 a month from now, and then I say to him after we've sealed the deal and the transaction has been completed, oh, by the way, you owe me this $12 a month from now, but I will forgive that debt. If you pay me $10 today, that's perfectly fine, because then the sale has already been consummated. It's not a question I was mefarish upfront, two different prices. I'm just basically selling the person's debt to him. I could sell I could sell my debt. I could sell somebody else's debt at a discount. You're allowed to sell debt at a discount. Something that Rabbi Bleich likes to talk about and write about a lot. This helps to solve like all the world's problems when you sell debt at a discount. So therefore, I could do the same thing. The person already bought the merchandise. They already owe me. If it's already a sealed deal, if they owe me the $12 a month from now, I could say that I will let you off the hook. That you only have to pay me $10 if you pay me today, rather than waiting until the end of the month. But that's after the sale has already been transacted. It's after the sale has already been completed. Okay, now we learned something else from Huzla, which is going to create a problem with respect to Marbin al Askar. We said Marbin al Askar, bein Marbin al Mecha. That's how we started. Marbin al Askar. So now we learned something with respect to Huzla. Wait a second. Why is it that Marbin al Askar is okay? Marbin al Askar is okay because, as we said, because here in this transaction, because of that principle of Ein Skiros Mishlemes Ela B'Sof, wonderful. So now I know that the real price, as opposed to all the Mecha transactions, where the real price is often generally going to be the price that's charged that you would pay upfront. But when it comes to Skiros, the real price is the price that you pay at the end. So therefore, I could charge the person a discount. So here we have a big kasha. What's the big kasha? The kasha is, but what about Huzla? Huzla is that I have a problem not only if the person who's buying the goods ends up paying extra money in the end for the weight, but it's also a problem if the person who's selling the goods sells extra goods because of the fact that he got money up front, right? That's the case of Huzla. We said unless it's Yeshlo, whatever, ain't Shemasa you do it. But otherwise, I have a problem in the case of Huzla. So why then don't I have a problem of Huzla in the Mabin al Askar case? In the Mabin al Askar case, so granted, there's no problem that I said if you pay me at the end, you're going to have to pay me $1,200. But when I say if you pay me at the beginning, you only have to pay me $1,000. The person's paying me $1,000, and I'm giving him $1,200 worth of real estate. I'm giving him $1,200 worth of a lease term. That lease term is worth $1,200, and I'm giving it to him for only $1,000. So I'm giving him extra. I'm giving him 5 balls of wax, when really what he paid really should only buy him 4 balls of wax. So why is that not a problem? So this is the big question that Tosfos and Baba Basra ask. Baba Basra, so Tosfos is talking about the following case. Well, what's the case? The case is that the Gemara and Baba Basra throws in what's another case of skiris. I can either rent out my property. What else I can rent out? I can rent out myself. I can rent out myself as a poel. So the Gemara has this interesting chiluk between a distinction between whether a poel is rented, whether, let's say, I pay a discounted rate for a poel that he's going to start working for me, and normally if he works in my grain yard in Nissan, so he would get, there's a lot of work to be done, so he would get 4 zuz a day. If he works in my granary in Tishrei, so he gets 1 zuz a day. So I hire him in Tishrei at the rate of 1 zuz a day, but he's not going to start working until Nissan. So we say, well, then essentially he's paying me 4 zuz of work a day because of the fact that I gave him 1 zuz today. So he's doing a day's work 6 months from now that's worth 4 zuz. So therefore, that's going to be asa. But it's going to be mutter if I stipulate with him today in Tishrei that he's going to get paid 1 zuz a day, and he's going to keep on working at the rate of 1 zuz a day from now until Nissan. That basically he starts working today. It's the Gemara doesn't actually say from now until Nissan. It says he starts working today. He starts working today, so then I already locked him in. Since I already locked him in, it's already a sealed transaction, so it's considered to be like the case where I'm providing a discount I say, give me 1 zuz and I'll give you five balls of wax, and I give you the 5 balls of wax right away. So that's for sure not a problem. Even though for most people it's 4 balls of wax. So fine, I gave you five balls of wax. Most people I'm going to charge $1. I'm going to charge $4. To you, I'm going to charge $1 because I'm starting right away. So I'm going to start right. So since I'm starting right away, I need the work. So I'm going to charge you $1. So the market price is $1 today. It's $4 in Nissan, but I'm going to just charge you $1 for the whole thing. And I start working immediately. So there is no ribbis because there's no agunat. There's nobody's waiting for anything. The job started immediately. So that the Gemara says is perfectly okay. Fine, that's perfectly okay. But that wasn't a requirement. It says Tosfos in the case of the of Mabin al-Askar. In the case of Mabin al-Askar, it could be that the fellow was paying me $1,000 up front for a 12-month rental, and the rental is only going to start a month from now. So why is that permissible? Why is that permissible? So here we have a machlokis between the Rashba and the Rashba. You have machlokis between the Rashba and the Rashba. Sort of an unparalleled, an uncommon thing. The Rashba is arguing double personality, or sort of split personality. Today he says this, tomorrow he says I don't know. So two different Rashbas. There's the Rashba and Tosfos. That's the Rashba and Ava Mishans, the famous Rash Mishans. We all know Rash Mishans. And then there's the Rashba, of course, the Stam Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, the Chidushei Rashba, and Shuvas Rashba. So the Rashba and Tosfos says as follows. Take a look at source 23. Near the Rashba, the Had Tanan, it's already suspicious. So it's Tosfos quoting a Rashba. So you have to understand which Rashba he's talking about. The Had Tanan Be'ezu Neshech. Must be talking about an equivalent situation to the worker situation. It must be that the rental started immediately. Not that it was a discount and the rental is only going to start a month later. No, it must have started immediately. The Mexican otherwise it says here that it looks like ribbis. So therefore it wouldn't be just like it wouldn't be permissible for work, it wouldn't be permissible for a house. Comes along Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet and says, no, it's different. He says that the case of the poel is a different story because you know what a poel can do? A poel can be choser. He's yochel aksor. A poel yochel aksor b'chatzir yom. You know when else a poel is allowed to be choser? Before he even starts. He can be choser even before he even starts. He agreed to something. There's a whole ritva. Oh, what if it's a kinyan? Hey, if you get kinyan. A poel, we generally assume, like the Shach says, a poel can always be choser. It doesn't even make a kinyan with them. Bells and whistles doesn't matter. Belt and suspenders. A poel is always allowed to be choser. So says the Rashba, the last few lines in source 24. This is the Rashba Baba Basa Pei Zayman Al. Mission the Shapol Yakal Aksu Bo Racial Lokavi Behedi the also of the Mexican Ribbis. Because of Rizal the Davka Bipoel who the Osru but Lokavi Mehash the Behedi the Mexican Ribbis. So over the Mishtabi Pol the Gami because the Pol is not completely Mishtabi because he can be choser. Mehash the Yakal Aksu. But B'skiras Karka, even if the money that's paid up front is paid up front before the rental term begins. It's a month before the rental term begins, 2 months before the rental term begins, 6 months before the rental term begins. No problem. It's locked in. It's like you've made a kinyan. You made a kinyan at that point in time. So then you are allowed to even be mefarish. You're allowed to be mefarish. Why are you allowed to be mefarish? You could be mefarish in a case where the real price is the final price. Since the real price is the final price, so therefore you can be mefarish that I'm going to provide a discount if you pay up front, and because of the fact that there's already a kinyan, it's already locked in, it's considered as if the person has made a kinyan on the real estate. They made a kinyan on the real estate on some level. There's a lumdus here. I have a chana on this. That normally, if you pay at the end, you're paying for the schus and shtamshus. If you pay up front, you're paying it's more of a mecher. So it's considered to be a kinyan, and therefore you don't have to have started already. How do we paskin like the shach the nekudas hakesef? Simon Kuf Ayin Vav Sivav says Mashno Skanas and Dalchi Moshe is quoting from the Ramon and Dalchi Moshe. It's like Rav Shlomo ben Aderet, like that Rashba. Below goes my money is B'Shem Rashba Balatoisos. It's not like that goes my money is quotes the other Rashba. He's quoted and he points out the same thing as we find within the Nemuki Yosef, and the same is Mashma from the Lashon of the Rambam and the Mechaber, because both the Rambam and the Mechaber, in the case of the worker, they say that if you're hiring the worker at a discounted rate, the worker has to start working immediately, but they don't have that condition with respect to Mabin al-Askar when it comes to real estate. When it comes to real estate, they just say that the real estate, you can stipulate 2 prices, and they don't say that the real estate, that the rental has to begin immediately, so therefore it's clear that seems to be the way that we pass. And this is relevant when you're hiring workers, for sure. you're hiring like a babysitter. So let's say the babysitter normally charges $18, but I say to this babysitter, I'm going to need you a lot over the course of the summer. I have a lot of different days that I want you to be available, and I'm going to hire you. You're just constantly going to have, jobs available for me. But since I'm telling you that you're going to be my only babysitter for the summer and you're going to get a lot of jobs from me, I'd like you to work for $16 an hour. So you can do that with the babysitter if you say, oh, and we're starting today, by the way. But if you're only going to start a week from now, so then you wouldn't be allowed to do that with a babysitter. So therefore, it comes up in these types of situations. It comes up. The Shevet Alevi, Shmuel Vosner points out that it could be that if I'm dealing with somebody who's not a poel, I'm dealing with somebody who doesn't have to work during fixed hours. Like a contractor. A contractor might charge me by the hour, but he's basically hired to do a particular job. So he says that I have a big difference between a poel and a kablon. What's the difference between a poel and a kablon? So even if you're of the opinion that assuming that with a kinyan and no matter what you put into place, a poel is still allowed to be choser, it's not true with respect to a kablon. A kablon was not an eved to begin with, so therefore he was not given this dispensation that he has the right to be choser. He's bound by his contract, by his job. He's obligated to work, so therefore he's considered to be locked in the same way that the skiras karka is locked in, and therefore he paskins that in a contractor situation you can contract for a discounted rate. This is the long Shevet Levi source 26. You can contract for a discounted rate, even if the contractor is only going to begin his work on your bathroom or your kitchen or whatever it is your sukkah. He's only going to start a couple of months from now. So he says that would be perfectly acceptable. On the other side of the coin, with respect to the real estate, Rabbi Akiva Eiger makes an interesting suggestion, and there's a big literature, meaning of machlokes between contemporary poskim about how to read this Rabbi Akiva Eiger, how seriously to take the Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Akiva Eiger, if you look in the boldface type in his Chidushim, Baba Metzia Daf Ayin Beis and Beis, he says that if the idea with respect to why we're makel, when it comes to the house, is that you're locking it in and you're completing sort of the kinyan ahead of time, and so he says, this only makes sense, says Rabbi Akiva Eiger, if the house is really able to be sold at that point in time, meaning it's ready to be sold. But let's say that there's another tenant who's living in the house, so that even though the landlord is signing the contract, the landlord is not capable of giving over the apartment at this point in time. So then he says that he thinks that the discounted transaction would be a problem in the case of a rental, like the Rosh Mishans, if the person's not moving in immediately because it's not available for delivery. You take a look. Blah, blah, blah. He says this is only a bias that's not chasaklum. He's contrasting it with the milk case. Won't go into that. Look in the brackets. For efshe gam bias shesachal achevim beskivu lezeh bakdamas mo sheyodav leakasman skivus shelzeh after nit basakinyan. And so he says so it could be with a bias that is currently being occupied with other people. Mikomakom also the kuliyama. Maybe even the Rashba of Rav Shlomo ben Aderet would hold that this is also kimin sheinu yachol the kayim akinyan akshav. So some say, yeah, Rabbi Akiva Eiger was saying like with Derech Efsher, it's in brackets. He didn't mean it, It's like a possibility, but we don't really paskin that it's a problem. And others say no. Rabbi Akiva Eiger said explicitly that this is a problem. So some machlokes amongst contemporary poskim exactly how to read this Rabbi Akiva Eiger, but you can certainly understand why it'd be an issue. So the same chachmas Adam who was so makel with respect to those credit transactions where the person is clearly stating that I'm making a special deal to give you a special price if you pay me today, a lower price, but really the main price that he's stating is the one that's being sold in the stores all the time, and he said he thinks you can be makel. So the same Chachmas Adam, by the same logic, the Chachmas Adam give it and the Chachmas Adam take it away. The Chachmas Adam says with respect to rental transactions nowadays, it's not the way it works. It's a nice concept that we start off maybe for other inyanim of halacha, so when we're not dealing with like applying mumminus, so there still is a general yesod. However, when it comes to the reality of how we apply the laws of Ribbis, if indeed a landlord can come after the tenant and insist on this payment on a monthly basis, and the tenant doesn't have the ability to wait until the end of the rental period, or even within every single month to insist on the payment on the first day of the month as opposed to the 30th day of the month, so then he says that it's not true. And then the price that's paid upfront is the real price. And if you're charging, extra because the fact that it's going to be paid later on, so then that would be a Ribbis problem. There's a Machnei Ephraim that says no, is an eternal yesod, and it's not one which is subject to qualification or any kind of reservation. It's a one which is absolute for all time. But later poskim say that even the Machnei Ephraim would agree, probably, that if the landlord had the ability to take the tenant to court and to actually exact the money from the beginning of the month, it would be very, very hard to be makel, even according to that opinion. Now, the last thing that I'll just mention with respect to these inyanim is that it really comes up much more often than you would imagine, because you have many situations where people are sort of locking in prices, and particularly where they're making payments where they're in a discounted payment format. Like, for example, every single summer I send my children to, Mara Shakol, at least one child, if not more. And usually we get, this notice that says that if you pay by February 15th or whatever, it's a certain amount, you pay, afterwards it's a great amount. Is that considered to be permissible or not? So some say, well, you're really hiring the Polim, you're hiring all of the workers. You think that the people who work, Rabbi Joseph and the others who are working in Moshe Kolel or Camp Morashah, they only start working like, in May or June. They're working around the entire year. They have full-time, salaries or whatever. This is a full year proposition, and therefore you're paying already for the workers to start doing the work that's going to be relevant for the summer. Or you could make the argument that you're also paying for the bunks. Hey, you're paying for the bunks. That's real estate. So, okay. So therefore you could have, even if they didn't start living there already, you're already registering the payment. So there are various arguments. It's an interesting, although it's very interesting, the Bris Pinchas actually says that he thinks that it's a big problem. He thinks that the tuition discounts with respect to a camp are a big problem. He says, oh, so you want to say that because it's a stuck institution, generally speaking, it's like a yeshiva camp or something like that, so you can be makel. He says, no, you can only be makel if they're the ones who are the beneficiaries, not if they're giving you a greater service for less money and they're the ones who are actually losing out. So then he says you can't be makel. But the Maharsham has an important principle, and this is the very last source, which goes to show that we're almost finished. Does it say 435 there or 455? 135? Okay, no. So the Maharsham says that if the money that's given over like early on, the sort of the prepayment discount amount is not for purposes of obtaining greater merchandise, but just because for example, the merchant needs to know how many of a particular item to produce. So he just needs to know how many subscribers there are, and the amount that is being requested to be paid upfront is commensurate with simply just registering an obligation and a commitment that they know that this person is serious about their commitment, their obligation to participate or to purchase this object or to participate in this program or something like that. So then the Maharsham says that in such a case, he does not think that it would be a problem, because the money is not being requested in order that the provider have extra funds available, but just that they will have a knowledge of how many people have a serious commitment. That's the parentheses in the Maharsham and the Mishpat Shalom Simon Reish Test Tifkad and Chopes. Chopei Lefinias Daita Gamin Nasa Ma'at Moshe Nikolayin. That's not the reason for the discount. The main reason for asking for this money is just to know that there will be how many people are interested in the schora. So he says, so in such a case, that's not really considered to be problematic in terms of asking for money up front for that particular purpose. Now, again, if you're going to have a two-tiered system, so that becomes more like of a mefarish problem, and I don't think that you necessarily get out of the problem in when you have a mefarish, unless you give the svara that either you're hiring the workers or you're renting the real estate, and it's somehow making the camp prepayment or yeshiva prepayment has to do with hiring the workers or the facilities right away. You wouldn't have as ready a heter. If you're relying upon the notion, I'll give a couple of other examples. The newspaper subscriptions as well. It's interesting. So Rav Reisman writes that if there is sort of a special discount which is given with respect to newspaper subscriptions, or he says even you're paying up front, but then you're getting the newspaper afterwards. So he thinks that it's a big problem because of the fact that you're paying less in order to get all the newspapers later on, and therefore he thinks that the only way, if it's a Jewish newspaper, that you can really do it is in the event that you would have the option of putting the money in escrow until the newspapers are actually ready to be distributed. So if you have the option of putting it in escrow, so that demonstrates that the newspaper publishers are not in need of the money. They just want to be able to see how many people are committed to buying the newspaper, so that they know how many newspapers to publish and so forth. But if they're going to take the money right away, so then he considers that to be problematic. The Bris Pinchas is less bothered by the newspaper example because he says that newspapers in general, that's the normal course. That's the real price is basically what is that you're going to. I'm sorry. He says the normal course is that you pay now in order to get the newspapers later on. So whatever amount the newspapers are given later on, it's not like they're giving you extra newspapers. That's like the normal way in which it's done. But whenever you have a two-tiered system, it is going to be more problematic based on the principle of tarsha, unless you have either real estate or workers that you can rely upon. So I don't know. So in the Marshakol case, probably you'd have to rely upon the workers' svara and the real estate svara, but I don't know that you can rely as readily about sort of having a placehold svara if there is a two-tiered system. If they say that if you pay this much now, it's this much. If you pay more, and if you wait later, then it's going to be more money, unless they can demonstrate that the costs go up. That the costs go up, the out-of-pocket costs go up when they don't know, and therefore you don't tell them until a later date, then they have more out-of-pocket costs, and the amount extra that's charged is commensurate to those extra costs. So then you have a possible svara to be makel as well. So all of these things have to be navigated in every single situation, which is why the Nesivos gave this directive to his children and his descendants that you really have to learn these halachos very, very carefully, because it's really not so pashut. Some say that if you have a bulk sale and you pay more and you pay less per item because you are buying the item in bulk, so that's considered to be okay because there's a different price. Basically, it's not like you're simply that you're getting a discount because you're willing to wait. If you would use all of your bus tickets in one day, it would still be the same price for the bulk tickets. So therefore, it's not considered to be a huzla type of transaction. It's just a different price where that's being charged for immediate purchase of things that are in bulk, and therefore there is more of a kula with respect to things that are bought in bulk, and with respect to airplane tickets, where again, I don't know if the owner of El Al is probably Jewish, right? So with respect to airplane tickets, let's say there's a discount for buying earlier. So there, the poskim point out that the Seder Ribbis and other poskim and other Svarim point out there's no real problem in that case, based on the principle that we quoted in the name of the Chazon Ish, that whenever you're getting the item right away, so then there's no real shaila. At least if you're the one who's paying the lesser price, there's no real shaila with respect to what you're getting, because you're getting an item of value right away. You're getting the ticket. It's not like what you're buying is not the flight. You're buying the ticket. That's basically what you have already purchased. And when you pay the money, you're getting the product immediately. Namely, you're getting the ticket immediately, and then you could do things with the credit. You could exchange it maybe for a different ticket. You could do things with the ticket. But that's since you're getting the merchandise right away, so therefore that's not considered to be a problem. Yes.
Not transferable. The fact that they'll give you something with it is just like any other service. You can have a real thing, don't buy it, right? I mean, well, the pashas is what they're giving you as a service.
Well, I don't know. Unless you say that the workers are working for you immediately, they haven't worked for you. They're not doing it yet. I mean, the flight hasn't begun yet. It's not like the person who's working, my contractor who's who's working for me, or the POA who's working for me from day one. No, it's called the suchus tisa. That's what the post I'm talking about. You're buying a suchus tisa. You're buying, yeah. Okay, but it's something that I'm buying right away. It's something that I'm buying right away. That's the point. What? No, but I have the suchus right away. I have locked in that suchus.
You can't sell that. It's not worth it. You can't sell it. only valuable to me.
I might be able to exchange it, right? I could for a different ticket. They say I actually have something. It could be, by the way, that in years past maybe it was worth more. Like before you had 9/11, maybe there was more.
But also, I mean, I don't by the airplane. I don't know, but
relatives.
I'm saying if you don't wait, if you don't buy it early, you might not get a seat at all. I'm saying, all right. I'm saying, is it really that you're discounting for early payment, or you're just reserving your seat? I'm saying it doesn't.
You're saying that it might be a skivus amokum. Might be a skivus amokum. You're reserving your space for this period of time. That's an interesting question as to whether we view you sitting on an airplane as a skivus amokum. I have to.
I'm saying because
Have
I'm
to
saying
really
otherwise, like
inspect
I'm
it.
saying.
Can I light my Hanukkah candle on my seat? Is that considered to be ner Shavesa? I don't know. It's an interesting question. Yeah.
Also,
If
I'm
it was
saying
a train
Lamaisa.
compartment, the Marasham would probably say yes. Right.
Lamaisa, though, what do you say about the? So what do we do
I'm
about the
sorry.
early?
Second, he's still talking.
Lamaisa, what do you do about the early discounts for the Jewish institutions? Don't just pay the full rate later?
I don't know. It's an interesting question. I think you have the Maharsham's heter in many cases that what they're really charging for is just the commitment that they know essentially how many people to provide for and so forth. But the money has to be commensurate to that in terms of what's actually being charged. The real problem that I have that I don't have a perfect solution for is when you're mefarish two different prices. When you mefarish two different prices, so then it becomes much more problematic unless you have the skivus amakom or the Polim argument. It becomes I don't know, it becomes a more thorny. I would think it becomes a more thorny issue. Or if you have the argument that I don't know, for a discount, if you're buying the thing, if whatever you're buying is right away, so then I guess that's okay. If you're but if you're paying extra because you didn't take advantage of the discount and the real price is maybe the earlier price, so I don't know. Then it becomes it's not so pashut. I'm just identifying some of the issues. Some of the issues have easy solutions. Some of them don't have easy solutions. Some of the poskim recommend using heteriscus with respect to some of these different types of transactions. It's not every single case is going to be mutter. There will be a number of cases that will be mutter, but not every single case is going to be mutter. So I just wanted to identify some of the issues and some of the different cases and some of the different questions, and obviously. There's more that can be discussed and more that can be evaluated and can be thought about in the time ahead as we continue to learn Hilchos Ribbis. Okay, continue. A number of the posting, the Bris Pinchas certainly makes that argument with respect to certain things.
These ones volunteer for 20 minutes for 12, 13 years.
Okay.
And then the week after is cases that we just talked about. Oh, really? Good. So you want to give me a date now for that week? The week of the 18th.
Oh, I can do the week of the 25th.
Week of the 25th.
I guess Tuesday, right? So I guess Tuesday, 26th. 26th, yeah. I'll be here that week, Mr. Yeah. Speaking the Tzimmek-based medrash. Yeah.
I don't know how every camp works, but like the summer camp I have my son to, well, they don't charge you less for camp for paying for camp. The only thing they give an early bird camp is registration. I mean, your registration fee is a joke. I mean, they're just charging you more because they want to know you have a spot.
Right, so that makes sense. That's consistent with the Marasham.
Right, and the difference is like $100. Like it doesn't make a difference. It's not a big difference. It's just that if they know there's X amount of people in the spot, they know how many counselors they have to hire the counselors in November.
Right.
Ridiculous. They have to hire the counselors in November for June. Right. So they have to know how many people they're going to have. So it's much easier for them to know in November as opposed to knowing in April how many people they're going to have. So like I don't know if Rosh but when you actually pay for camp, they don't charge you. It doesn't matter when you pay. They can charge you the same amount.
So then that's fine.
Yeah. So and like schools do the same thing. Schools the only thing they give you an early bird discount for is registration.
Okay.
Not for tuition.
But camps do it.
I don't know. Maybe they do.
Camps do it.
I've never. The only thing I know is the registration.
Camps you get an early bird discount for early sign up. Yeah.
I was gonna say, isn't all the camp payments are early. Right? You shouldn't really be required to pay them until after camp, until they start working.
Right, but if this is sort of the normal custom that everybody pays early and it's the same price, so then that should be okay. Then that should be okay. Meaning that if there's no Shemasa Yedua and this is what they charge, and they just say, right, no, probably not, right, right, exactly, and it happens that the price that they charge is a certain amount that they need the